fought throughout the Second World War. Was the Battle of Britain the hardest part? The hardest fight?
The hardest part, I believe, yes. Yes.
July 1940. The German armies that have conquered Europe are preparing to cross the English Channel and invade Britain. But to win the Battle of Britain, the Germans must have command of the air. They must destroy Britain's Royal Air Force. With no air force, Britain will be defenseless. Now Britain's last line of defense are the fighter pilots. Flying with the Royal Air Force and with the Royal Canadian Air Force are more than 100 Canadians. Among them is a 24-year-old flight lieutenant, Robert Barton.
I was very fond of flying. It was like driving a car, only you were having much more fun still.
This interview was the one we picked up for King and Country to try to beef up the Battle of Britain piece in it. And we had very little prior to finding Barton. And of course, how many Canadian Battle of Britain pilots were still alive in 2004. So we managed to get hold of actually 3 or 4. And we started to talk to them as we went on. And one of them, of course, who comes to the forefront was Butch Barton. And one of the reasons he's at the forefront is that no one's ever heard of him. I found him living as a hermit in central British Columbia, and he was fascinating. He was very special, and he really added to the show.
How did you come to be fighting for England?
I did it because I had a mother that was English, and she was brought up in Ireland and so on, and she was very fond of England as such. And it made me, within the family, that I was perfectly well happy to do so.
Which was not uncommon. A lot of guys went over for an RAF short-term commission. A lot of from the Commonwealth or the Empire went over for this, and you'll see them in the Battle of Britain. Those are the Canadians who were fighting in the earlier stages of the Battle of Britain, as opposed to when the RCF arrives, which is 401 Squadron. And I think it's in September 1940. So that's one of the other reasons I chose Barton, because he was involved a little bit earlier, and he was also had a number of kills. And he was the more you looked into him, the more fascinating he became.
So how old were you at the time when you joined up?
I was about, I suppose I must have been 18.
When you joined up, were you thinking about a Second World War at the time?
No, but I was well aware that doing what I was doing by joining, that war, if it came, I was going to be in it. And it was up to me to see what I could do.
And so when the war broke out, he was attached already to British fighter squadrons. In fact, he was in 249 Squadron, which gets involved about August 1940 in the Battle of Britain. And also during the Battle of Britain, he becomes an ace. He later becomes he was acting squadron leader at that point. And then later he becomes squadron leader of 249 when they get moved to Malta, and he becomes a Malta ace, shooting down more than 5 aircraft. Ends up with the war as a DFC in Bar as a wing commander, and he was had about 14 kills with numerous probables and shared. He was quite exceptional.
When the Battle of Britain began, what would you say was the state of readiness of the RAF?
Quite good, really. Quite good. But we hadn't got the resources behind us.
The pilots of the RAF and RCAF are vastly outnumbered, facing a massive German fleet of over 3,000 fighters and bombers. This now is the crucial battlefield.
There were few of us to the numbers of Germans. We didn't know that. We knew they were probably more numerous than we were, but we didn't know how many, and we were never told just how many the British really thought they were fighting, because that would have been obviously not good for morale.
Well, funny thing about Barton, of course, is how come I've never seen his memoir? How come I've never seen anything about him? So I had a contact information for him in BC, and I called him up, and I decided he would be the one to get if we could get anybody. So I started to talk with him, and of course he didn't remember. He was 88. I don't remember anything. I'll be a waste of time. And of course, next thing you know, you're on the phone for an hour and a half. He's told you all sorts of stuff. He was buds with the famous Douglas Batter, the legless fighter pilot. Batter was CO of 242 Squadron, which was the Canadian RAF squadron. And of course, he had lost his legs in an accident. He used to come over and talk to Barton. And Butch said he'd be putting his legs back up and putting them on the stove, to stay warm. And he said all of a sudden he'd yell because, of course, he had metal legs, and ultimately they'd come down and burn his stumps, which made him jump. And I said, "Oh, I'm going to be in the neighborhood with a film crew. Do you mind if I come over and film you just for fun?" Oh, right, we can do that. So then I said, "Where do you live?" Because I had no idea where he was. So he was in Headley, which is an old gold mining town in central British Columbia. So I ended up flying into Penticton and driving through Carameos out to Headley, where I'm going to meet him. And I remember saying, "How will I find you?" He said, "I'll be at the store." So I arrived there, and there's this little old guy with a baseball cap on standing out in front of the store. And of course, that was Butch. Well, when I first got him, I got there. He wanted to entertain me. "We should go up and see the gold mine." So we get in his car, his four-wheel drive truck, and of course, he's driving, and he's 88. And he says, "I should have been wearing my glasses." I'm going, we're going down the highway, and he's going over into the other lane, and I'm going, yeah. I was actually reaching over at one point. And then he turns off, and he goes up the hill, and you go, the way it loops all the way around and winds all the way up to go to the top of the hill. And of course, you're going near the edge each time, and you're going, he's going right near the edge. Then he takes me to the top, and then he's going to come down. And that was the worst part, because he's going. So the rest of the trip, I did all the driving. But we went to his house. There was nothing in it to suggest he was a World War II anything.
So at that time, when the war breaks out, are you a fighter pilot at that time?
Yes, I had been well trained already by that time. I was well experienced, and I had flown the biplanes, and I had flown the monoplanes, and I had flown a Spitfire for some time. And I've been to Southampton to the Spitfire makers. They treated me very well because you were taking an aeroplane straight out of their factory. It had only been flown by the test pilot before you, and that was it. He only had a quick look at it, and I passed it as fit out of the workshop, and you came along and you took it away. You flew it up to your airfield.
But he had never really been interviewed. So as I kept talking to him, of course, he did remember everything. And he recounted how he did all his operations. But he's talking about that when they finally get involved, they get moved to North Weald, north of London, and they're going to get involved in the fights over Britain in August and September 1940. This is the North Weald airstrip. And in 1940, it was home to Butch Barton's 249 Squadron. North Weald was attacked in September 1940. The German Heinkel bombers came over this direction here, and of course they caught the Hurricanes on the ground. The men had to scramble, get into the aircraft, and get off while the airstrip is blowing up and being strafed by German fighters.
Holy Christmas, everything was coming down on top of us. Bombs, etc., etc. And all I could do was look up and see aircraft above. And if that stuff was coming down, God damn it, it had to be enemy aircraft. So I took off and flew into it. They were so busy trying to get home. They were not defending anything. They were just flying out. They'd done an attack and they were homeward bound. Little did they know that they got a few enemy aircraft right in their midst. And shot at 3 quite seriously.
But yeah, he really makes you feel like you're there. And the little mental games he's playing with himself and the way he's explaining it is very interesting as well, because he was afraid. Barton was afraid until he took off and got involved in a melee.
I was very much afraid, always on takeoff. I found that when we started to get up, gaining altitude, I found that if you sighted the enemy, a lot of your fear disappeared. It was rather marvelous because, God, there they are.
He looks at me and he has the eyes, right? He has the killer eyes.
There they are. You've had it, boy.
That they all have. All the fighter aces have.
There were 100 of them at least. That to me was something unbelievable.
So he goes in, he talks about taking a pot shot at them, and of course you see the glycol would start to stream out of the engine, the coolant's coming out, and then you would have to move on to something else. He said you wouldn't have time to chase them down. A couple of times he did chase them down to the barrage balloons, but and he recounted some of his fights in great detail.
We attacked, and the first aircraft I shot at didn't do anything. It just stayed in formation. Then I tried another one. And as he went down, I followed him. And I followed him all the way. I said, all right, this one I'm going to make sure he's bloody well down. Because this is a crazy business.
And he talks about, for example, within Battle of Britain, when you had the big squadrons, the 100 aircraft, you had to dive in on them. You couldn't wait. If you waited, the fighters would engage you. And any guy on the squadron who suggested that they should wait would be off squadron the next day. They wouldn't take that. I love to ask them all questions. How do you make your mind up? What's the decision that you like to make? How do you do this? How do you make that decision? And of course, I looked at him and I said, you're attacking a bomber stream. There's 100 of them. And you go in. How do you know which one to pick? He goes, just like that.
How did you make your decision when you're going into action? Which plane
I don't know, you made up your mind just like that. As quick as you make up your mind, or I do now. Just as quick as that. That's the only way to do it. And anyway, it's like if you're in a fight, boxing, or any other damn thing, you got to be quick.
They're like going, ah! I think I just about went over in the chair.
It's as simple as that.
He was good at it. He had the eyesight and he had the attitude to go ahead at it. And of course, when he gets shot down, he just all of a sudden there's smoke coming out of the cockpit. He doesn't know what's going on. And he's saying, oh, calm down. You got lots of time. Get the canopy off. You have lots of time. Don't panic. Which is brilliant, actually. It's almost like yoga he's doing on. And he's going to boot it off. And of course, that one we covered in the show. We used that piece in the show, King and Country.
When you just think you're going to get one and you get hit, that's a very nasty thing. You say, oh, hell, that's great, that's bad. Oh my God, the damn thing, the airplane's on fire. What a disappointment. And what fear now? What fear? How do I get out of this damn thing?
But it's interesting to watch him buck himself up. So he's going like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Even if I don't think I can, I'm going to do it.
As I fell through the sky, I said, well, now you better open your parachute. You better find that the ripcord on the parachute at your chest. Now find that, fella. You're falling through the sky. And when I finally landed, I didn't roll over or anything. I just stripped the tree down, and there I was, standing at the bottom with stripped pear tree in somebody's backyard.
And he ends up showing up at the back at the base by a taxi, still wearing his chute. And I think he was flying. I don't know if he flew later that day, but he was certainly flying the next day.
And some days I'd be shot down, and I would come back in the same day and fly another airplane into the battle.
So he becomes a Battle of Britain ace in September 1940.
One day, we were told, this is your last day. Tomorrow, the invasion is going to occur. that was not very encouraging. Holy Christmas. We've come this far, and this is where we are. And I tell you, fellas, as soon as we're off duty tonight, I'm into the bar pretty quickly. I'm going to get myself a few glasses of beer.
So he was recounting it, and of course he's talking about the Eagle Day, which is when the Germans were going to come and they're going to finish them off. And it was the 15th of September.
September 15th. The Germans launched their massive assault on London. If the British lose their last fighters trying to save the city, the way will be open for the invasion. This will be the decisive day of the battle.
We did everything to get at the enemy quickly.
And he's also acting squadron leader because the real squadron leader was unable to fly. I remember asking about how do you need a good squadron leader? What made a good squadron leader? And he said necessity.
I'd come down from a considerable altitude above him, and I had speed on. At that time, he turned then and turned to fight, and I had a great difficulty in getting behind him again. Every time I closed up with him, he turned to fight. He climbed up into a cloud, and he thought he was going to be safe.
The guy cuts through the clouds. He thinks he's going to get away, and Barton's on his tail. And boom, 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 that's the end of him.
It was just great. When I came out of the cloud, there he was in front of me. And that was his bad luck.
And also, this is a logical decision. They're not killing people because they like it. This is what has to be done. And they're going to do their job. And they're going to do it better than the other guy.
So you were the hunter?
Yes, always, if possible.
During the day, the Canadians shoot down 11 aircraft. In all, the Luftwaffe loses almost 60 planes. Germany has failed to gain air superiority over Great Britain. 2 days later, the planned German invasion of England is cancelled. The Canadians in the Battle of Britain shot down over 100 planes.
Well, we did really know that we were at the last ditch. If that had failed, the Battle of Britain, that had been the end of Britain. And that would have been Germany had won the war and everything else and all over the world. Do you realize what would have happened? They'd have taken over everything. Everything. They'd have loved it.
You can see the depth of their character. You can see the way, just the simple things they handle themselves. They're all very modest, usually too modest. But he was the real deal. Those people were always scarce, but by 2004, most of them have passed. And he told me all these stories. But one of the ones he really becomes even a bigger character is in Malta, because he goes as the squadron leader of 249. 249 is the top fighter squadron in the RAF as the war progressed. And of course, Malta by 41, 42 becomes the most important battle in the Second World War.
April 1942. The Mediterranean island of Malta is under constant attack by the Luftwaffe. Speedy Me-109F fighters have overwhelmed the island's force of Hurricanes, opening shipping lanes to resupply Rommel's Africa Corps, and allowing bombers to release their payloads on the island with little or no opposition. For the few pilots still flying in Malta's defense, death seems only a matter of time, as the Luftwaffe hounds them relentlessly.
And of course, he's also talking about the early stages where they only had 303. They didn't have any cannon or anything on the aircraft. They were underarmed. And of course, you're going in with a bunch of pea shooters against these German aircraft. By 1942, of course, things had changed as they modified the aircraft. But he had gone over with Hurricanes, and he was the leader of the squadron. And of course, they used to be all billeted in a place called the Madhouse. I think it was a Madhouse because these guys were pretty wild. But the Madhouse was bombed by the Germans because they bashed the Cali airfield completely because it was that's where they used to keep their Spitfires. So I actually tried to find the Madhouse when I went to Malta, because I went to the Cali airfield, which is now not an airfield. It's for radio controlled airplanes. It's almost comical.
Today, the only aircraft Ta'ali Airfield serves are those of the local hobbyists. During the Second World War, however, this was one of the most important Allied fighter bases in Malta.
This was the original base of the Hurricanes 249 Squadron in May 1941, and this was the centerpiece for the defense of Malta. And of course, the Germans knew this, and it was constantly strafed and bombed. They come over 6, 7, 8 times a day with 100 bombers, and they just pound the hell out of this place. And by the spring of 42, there's only half a dozen serviceable Hurricanes in operation, and they were no match for the Messerschmitts. They had been upgraded.
So later on, he scores the kills. He becomes an ace in Malta, and he's there for a year before he's shipped back. He gets injured and gets shipped back in 1941. But again, he goes into battle, and he's explaining how he's chasing the guy down and how you're going to go after the guy and what you're looking for.
When you went to Malta?
Yes.
And you told me the story about the Italian pilot. Can you explain that to me again?
Yes, that was Italian. I was following out a Macchi formation that had flown over Malta, and he was trailing a little, and I was chasing one ahead of him, and he kept closing in on my right-hand side, and I couldn't accept that because it was an enemy aircraft, I reckoned. And when he got close enough, it turned out to be a Macchi 200. And I was chasing a Macchi 200 ahead of him. So I desisted, of course. I wasn't going to chase that one and let this man come and get me. That wasn't any good, so I had to turn on him. And we had a turning match, and I outturned him in a very quick time. Matter of just one turn. And he straightened out a bit and gave me a chance to shoot. And I shot, and one of my bullets hit him. I had very little ammunition. My guns were not firing properly, but I hit him, and he went down, and he went into the sea. And in the sea, he waved to me that he was in the sea, etc. And I was able to get the Air Sea Rescue, British Air Sea Rescue from Malta, to come out to me and home in on me flying above, and go out, and they picked him up, lucky for him. Because after a while I didn't stay because I was running short of fuel once again. You can't run out just like that. Anyhow, I saw him in hospital. I had a nurse that spoke Italian and spoke to him, and I asked him what he was doing, and he was asked what I was doing and why he got shot down. He seemed to think he didn't need to be shot down. Anyway, he did. I helped him with his various things, such as toilet wear, while he was in hospital in Malta, and he seemed quite a pleasant person. And he asked finally, after I'd seen him once or twice in hospital, I went back to see him again because I was interested in what he was doing and why. And he finally said, would I let his wife know that he was a prisoner of war? Could I let him? I said, yes, I possibly can. And I took action straight away through a source that was talking to the enemy, and they told him that this man had been lost. And they informed his wife and family that he'd been shot down and he was all right and all that sort of thing. So after the war, he wrote to the Air Ministry many years afterwards. He was, by this time, the chief test pilot of Mackie producing these aircraft, the Mackie 200, etc. And he was doing very nicely out of this. He was chief test pilot and all the rest. And pretty soon he was practically managing director of the company. And he was selling these airplanes in peacetime all over the world. They were doing very nicely out of it. And he was enjoying life. He was, oh yes, that's the way it went.
But Barton shows his sympathy for the Italian pilot, the one he chases down. Basically shoots him down, he goes into the water, and of course he hangs around until a boat picks him up and he's a POW. He talks about going in and giving him kit, shaving kit and all that sort of stuff. So they were quite sympathetic at that point.
You talked about being fitted with the extra fuel tanks to go searching on this island that the Germans may have been using.
Yes.
Can you explain that action to me? What happened with the plane?
Well, we only attacked it. I had a number 2 flying with me, one of my pilots, and he was a good fellow. That's fine. And the 2 of us, he was flying on formation with me.
And then he was sympathetic to the people that obviously he killed. He was most sympathetic. He caught him and a wingman caught this transport going over to North Africa, and they shot it down and it had no defenses. It's like a Dakota, the German equivalent. I can't remember which plane it is. And he said it was just terrible because they're trying to shoot out the windows with their pistols or whatever they got in there.
And we flew over that way, trying to save fuel and using these long-range tanks, which reduced our capabilities greatly. We couldn't fly fast, or they ripped the wings off our airplanes. All kinds of things were wrong. And suddenly I noticed an aircraft flying in the sky, flying on the route towards Africa, which surprised us. And they said, boy, that might be the one that we're trying to find. And my goodness, it turned out to be. And very quickly we closed in on him and opened fire. And he couldn't fly fast. He was a big transport aircraft. He was a 3-engine thing with, I suppose he had 17, 18 people on board, perhaps more. And these are all people going home or coming away from holidays in Germany where they were fighting the British out in the desert, in the plain desert of Africa.
But they hunted them down and found them. But that's what they are. That's what you're seeing with the ice. You're seeing hunters. They're hunters. A lot of the guys you interview hunted as kids, whether it's Radley Walters in tanks or whether it's any of these guys. They all knew how to hunt. They know how to go and take care of business. And also, this is a logical decision. They're not killing people because they like it. This is what has to be done, and they're going to do their job.
And of course, they hadn't any defense. They didn't have any firing worthwhile coming out, except that they were all men that were equipped with their war weapons. They carried machine guns and things, and they with these wretched little guns, they were poking them out of the side windows of this airplane, which with shooting at us with rubber bullets, I guess. Anyway, they couldn't hit anything with it. Not with those kind of guns. Short range.
And what did you do next?
Oh, they caught fire. They started to go down, and they caught fire because we had been firing at them, and we set them on fire. You bet. We hit one of their fuel tanks at least, and that would do it. It didn't take much to set that kind of an airplane on fire. So virtually all those people died. There wasn't one in that aircraft that lived, and I'm sure they had at least 20 people in that. At least I think they had 20 people in that aircraft. Probably more. Anyway, the Germans didn't like it. They stopped that route straight away. That was a bad one.
That's my questions.